Texas has one of the most clearly defined late fee frameworks in the country, with specific statutory provisions that spell out exactly what landlords can and cannot charge. The governing law is found in the Texas Property Code, Title 8, Chapter 92, Subchapter E, Sections 92.019 through 92.019, which provides detailed rules on late fee caps, grace periods, and enforceability. If you're a landlord or tenant in Texas, the statutory framework is specific and leaves little room for ambiguity. Let's start with the cap. Under Texas Property Code Section 92.019, a landlord may charge a late fee, but only if the fee is a reasonable estimate of uncertain damages to the landlord that are incapable of precise calculation and that result from late payment of rent. The statute specifically requires that the fee be reasonable and provides guidance on what reasonable means. Texas law sets a practical ceiling through the reasonableness standard. While the statute doesn't specify an exact dollar cap or percentage, Texas courts have consistently held that late fees in the range of 8 to 12% of the monthly rent are reasonable, depending on the circumstances. The Texas Apartment Association lease form, the most widely used residential lease in Texas, typically includes a late fee provision that's been vetted against this standard. Fees significantly above 12% of the monthly rent are increasingly vulnerable to challenge. Texas mandates a grace period. Under Section 92.019, the landlord cannot charge a late fee unless the rent remains unpaid 1 full day after the date the rent is due. Additionally, for properties located in municipalities or counties, which covers virtually all Texas rentals, the landlord must provide at least a 2-day grace period. In practice, the standard grace period used by most Texas landlords is 2 to 3 days, and the TAA lease form uses a specific grace period that complies with the statute. The statute also includes a critical notice requirement. Under Section 92.019, the late fee must be included in a written lease. A landlord cannot charge a late fee that isn't specified in the rental agreement. The lease must state the amount of the fee or the method for calculating it. Oral agreements about late fees are not enforceable. Texas law also requires that the late fee provision be underlined or printed in conspicuous bold print in the lease. This conspicuous notice requirement is designed to ensure that the tenant is aware of the late fee before signing. A late fee buried in fine print without emphasis may not satisfy this requirement, which could render the provision unenforceable even if the amount is reasonable. This conspicuous print requirement is unique to Texas and catches many landlords off guard, particularly those using lease forms from other states or generic templates. If you're a Texas landlord, verify that your late fee provision is either underlined or in bold. The TAA lease form satisfies this requirement, but custom or out-of-state forms may not. Texas law addresses the initial late fee and any daily charges separately. The statute allows a reasonable initial late fee and also allows a reasonable daily late charge for each day the rent continues to be unpaid. However, both the initial fee and the daily charge must independently be reasonable, and the total accumulation of daily charges must also be reasonable. A daily charge that could accumulate to exceed the monthly rent within a few weeks would almost certainly be deemed unreasonable. The interaction between late fees and the eviction process in Texas is well established. Under Texas Property Code Section 24.005, the landlord must provide a 3-day notice to vacate for non-payment before filing an eviction suit, unless the lease specifies a shorter or longer period. The notice must accurately state the amount owed. Whether late fees can be included in the notice depends on the lease. If late fees are defined as additional rent, they're includable. The TAA lease form typically defines late fees as additional rent. Texas courts in eviction proceedings will scrutinize the amount demanded, including non-compliant late fees, fees that exceed the reasonable standard, that weren't in bold or underlined print, or that weren't specified in the lease, can complicate the eviction. The tenant can challenge the fee amount as part of their defense. Getting the late fee right from the start prevents this issue. Texas also has a specific provision regarding the landlord's duty to accept partial payments. Under Section 92.019, if the tenant makes a partial rent payment, the landlord must apply that payment to the rent, not to the late fee first. This prevents the landlord from applying a partial payment to the late fee and then claiming the rent is still fully unpaid for eviction purposes. The rent obligation is reduced by the partial payment before any allocation to the late fee. For tenants receiving Housing Choice Voucher assistance, Texas landlords should not charge late fees when the housing authority's portion is delayed due to processing. Texas has a large voucher population, particularly in Houston, Dallas-Fort Worth, San Antonio, and Austin, and penalizing tenants for the authority's administrative delay creates both compliance issues and potential fair housing complaints. Texas has an enormous military population: Fort Cavazos, Fort Bliss, Joint Base San Antonio, and numerous other installations. Military pay arrives on the 1st and 15th of each month, predictable and reliable. When military tenants pay late, it's usually due to PCS transitions, deployment disruptions, or pay processing issues that resolve quickly. The standard 2 to 3 day grace period accommodates most of these short delays. Texas does not have a statewide preemption statute that specifically addresses local regulation of late fees, but the state's overall preemption framework and political environment mean that no Texas municipality has enacted local late fee restrictions that go beyond state law. Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, Fort Worth, and every other Texas city operate under the same state framework. From a practical standpoint, Texas has one of the largest rental markets in the country, and the late fee dynamics vary by metro. Houston has an enormous and diverse rental market. Late fee enforcement is standard practice across the metro, and most Houston landlords use the TAA lease form with its pre-vetted late fee provision. The key compliance issue in Houston is the conspicuous print requirement. Landlords using custom leases must verify that the late fee provision is properly formatted. Dallas-Fort Worth has one of the strongest rental markets in the country. The combination of corporate relocations, strong job growth, and steady in-migration creates a deep tenant pool. Well-screened tenants in DFW pay on time. Late fee enforcement is typically limited to a small percentage of the portfolio. San Antonio's military-heavy market means BAH-funded tenants who generally pay reliably. Late payment from military tenants is uncommon. When it occurs, it's typically related to PCS transitions. Austin's tech-driven market produces well-compensated tenants who rarely pay late. El Paso, Killeen, and other military-adjacent communities see late payment patterns that sometimes correlate with deployment cycles. When a unit deploys, family finances can become disrupted temporarily. Landlords in these communities should be prepared for occasional deployment-related late payments and should understand how SCRA protections may apply. The Rio Grande Valley, McAllen, Brownsville, Harlingen, has more affordable rents and a tenant population that includes many lower-income households. Late fee amounts should be calibrated to the local rent level. A fee that's reasonable on a $2,000 DFW rent may be disproportionate on a $700 Valley rent. College towns, College Station, Lubbock, Waco, Denton, have student populations where late payment sometimes correlates with the financial aid disbursement cycle. Some landlords near universities anticipate semester start delays and communicate proactively. One best practice for Texas landlords: use the TAA lease form or model your late fee provision on it. The TAA form's late fee provision has been vetted for compliance with Section 92.019, including the conspicuous print requirement, the reasonableness standard, and the partial payment allocation rule. Using a proven form eliminates compliance risk. Another best practice: verify that your late fee provision is underlined or in bold print. This is the single most commonly missed requirement in Texas. If you're using a custom lease, a template from another state, or a form that doesn't emphasize the late fee provision, It may be unenforceable, even if the amount is perfectly reasonable. A third best practice: apply partial payments to rent first, not to the late fee. This is what the statute requires, and getting the allocation wrong can undermine an eviction action. If a tenant pays $900 of a $1,200 rent, the rent obligation is reduced to $300, and the late fee is calculated based on the remaining rent, or charged in addition to the rent balance, depending on the lease terms. Texas does not cap security deposits by statute. The deposit must be returned within 30 days of the tenant vacating with an itemized statement of deductions. Unpaid late fees can be deducted from the deposit if the fees are compliant and the lease authorizes the deduction. Deducting non-compliant fees from the deposit compounds the violation. For the complete guide to Texas late fee laws, visit tenantscreeningbackgroundcheck.com. Subscribe to our channel for every state in our late fee law series.